Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Lambda School's mini boot camp. I am your instructor, Dan Frainer, and we are on lesson 4 tonight of our mini boot camp. Those that are just joining us, lesson 4 is tonight of 12 lessons. We're going to be going over the next 2 weeks, actually, 4 more lessons each week. So we do Monday through Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific time. And we do a lesson each night, Monday through Thursday, for a total of 12 lessons. Tonight is lesson 4. We're going to get an introduction to JavaScript tonight, which is essentially the programming language of the web, and especially of the front end. We've gone over HTML and CSS in the past. This week, we've gone over Git and GitHub and version control. And we got into some CSS positioning stuff last night. So we're kind of moving forward through the front end stack here. And we're going to start talking about JavaScript tonight. Those that are just joining us, this is lesson 4, but no need to worry. We're starting the introduction to JavaScript tonight. You can hop in and start learning tonight. And then the last 3 lessons are recorded and posted to YouTube. So feel free to go back and watch all the lessons and participate in the Slack channels and work on the assignments. Speaking of Slack channels, if you have any questions during the lesson tonight, please post it in the questions Slack channel. That's the channel that's monitored during the lesson for questions. If you have any questions pertaining to a specific item that you're having trouble with in an assignment, or a specific lesson that you don't quite understand the content, there is a lesson channel for each of the lessons, and that's going to be the CS lesson and then the number of what lesson it is. Tonight it's going to be CS lesson 04, which will pertain to everything doing with the introduction to JavaScript tonight. This mini bootcamp is put on by Lambda School, 100% free. Anyone around the world is available or is able to join in and work with us, take these lessons, work on the assignments, get help in the Slack channel, 100% free. This mini bootcamp kind of gives us an introduction to the tools we use as web developers. And by the end of the camp, we are going to be able to build a working web application. And that's the goal by lesson 12. And we'll get there as long as you stay the course with the lessons and continue working on the assignments. Where we leave off in this mini boot camp is where our Lambda School full-time Academy of Computer Science picks up. The full-time Academy of Computer Science is a 6-month program. It's 100% online. I want to talk a little bit tonight about how that operates and how it works and how our students kind of go through the program as a 100% online class. First and foremost, I talked about kind of a day in the life of a Lambda student last night. Today, we're going to start, I'll talk about the tools we use. So first and foremost, we use Slack for all of our communication. And so each cohort, each class of students, it starts each Monday or the first Monday of each month. Each one of those classes gets their own Slack group. And that's where you kind of hang out. You talk amongst your classmates. That gets pretty lively in those Slack groups. And that's also where you'll get instructions for the day's lessons, the code challenges, help with TAs. So Slack is kind of our central hub of information sharing and also, kind of just a general community of all Lambda School students are on that Slack as well. So there's a lot of really cool information going back and forth and a lot of great discussions happening. But most importantly, I should say, is where you're going to get instruction for the lessons and the assignments and things like that. As far as our video conferencing tools, all of our lessons are taught through a tool called Zoom. And Zoom allows all of the students and the instructor to join a room and the instructor to talk to the students answer questions as they come and go, and really give these really in-depth lessons on the content we're covering. And so you might have a one-on-one with your instructor or a TA, and you'll also use Zoom for that. And you can video conference back and forth. It's really great because you can see everyone in the class, and you can interact with everyone in the class through that Zoom room. We use GitHub for all of our assignments and labs and any projects that you're working on. We learned GitHub on lesson 1 this week. And GitHub is kind of the central area for the code and the assignments that we work on. So you'll do pushes and pull requests, and then you'll get your code reviewed by the instructors and the TAs, and you'll get feedback and kind of all of that assignments turning in, and those kind of things happen through GitHub, which is important because GitHub is used so widely in the professional world as your kind of go-to version control, as we talked about in lesson 1. And really getting good at working with Git and GitHub is really important. So that's why we use it for all of our assignments. We do pair programming. With our assignments and our labs, you're going to be paired with another student and you work on it together. And this is really awesome and really important because you get to see how someone else breaks a problem down and how someone else might solve it. And you get experience in talking through your problems and being able to verbalize what you're thinking, which is an important skill to have as a developer. And that pair programming is done through Zoom, through Slack. There's a couple of different solutions for the pair programming. You work with TAs all day long. Our TAs are fantastic. They're always available there for questions and for help throughout the entire course. And so, if you're working with your pair on an assignment and you're really stuck on this one problem and you've worked it out and you just can't come up with a solution, you can request a TA to come in and help, and they'll guide you along. No one's going to give you the answer to anything. That's for you to figure out, but they can help, get you past a roadblock and guide you along like that. And then our instructors as well are top quality instructors who are there giving you the lectures, who are doing question and answer sessions on all of our content, and also poke their heads in and help out when we need to as well. In the Slack, in one-on-ones, in the TA help, the instructors are always around as well. And that's kind of the tools we use as a school to work through, a 100% online boot camp or school. And being 100% online is awesome because it allows us to reach so many people that might otherwise not be able to attend a school. Someone that lives, not in an urban center, somebody that, maybe has accessibility issues, things like that. And we're able to bring this content to you. And it's really awesome. And I'm really happy that we get to do it 100% online and reach the widest audience we can. So that's kind of, the tools we use. And yeah, that's our Lambda School, Academy of Computer Sciences. We have a class starting the first Monday of each month. And that's our full-time class, and our next part-time class, which is an evening course, Monday through Thursday and Saturday mornings. That next class starts on the first Monday in July. If you are interested in applying for the April start date or that July part-time start date, please start your application process as soon as possible. The more time you have during the application process, the more likely it is that you'll be able to secure a seat on the date you want. So start the application process. Work with our admissions staff. This mini boot camp here counts towards your pre-work. So even if you're in the middle of it, start the application process, and you'll be a lot better off if you do. So going into today's lesson. I will share my screen here. So you'll notice things are a little bit different tonight. We're not using CodePen any longer. CodePen does have some JavaScript functionality to it, but that's more geared towards UI and what we see on the screen. Right now, I'm using a sandbox environment called Replit. And Replit allows us to write JavaScript and write the actual code here, and then we can see it printed out on this side of the screen, so we can get instant feedback. Once again, this is just for demonstration purposes. Feel free to go onto Replit and play around with it all you want, but all of the code you're going to be writing for the assignments is going to be done in your text editor, and I'll go over that at the end of class, how that works and how we get how we can run tests, and we got a little bit more stuff we're going to do with that tonight. So I want to hop right into JavaScript. The last couple of nights we've been talking about HTML and CSS and getting things to appear on a web page. We're going to talk about essentially the programming language of the web, which is JavaScript. So, we talked about HTML and CSS, and I like to give the analogy of, our web page or web application as a house, where HTML is kind of the bricks and mortar. It's the raw materials. It's the wood and the concrete of our house. It's kind of laying in a pile. CSS comes in, and CSS is our blueprint, our paint. It's how we put all that stuff together and how we make it look good. We got a house. It's made up. It looks good. You go flip the light switch and nothing happens. That's where JavaScript comes in. JavaScript is, I like to say, the electricity and the plumbing and gas. It's what makes a house work. It turns your lights on. It turns the faucet on. It flushes the toilet. Kind of all of that in the above. And all three of them together make this house. And so JavaScript is what makes a web page run, essentially. It's what makes a web application work. JavaScript was originally designed to be used purely on the front end. And we'll go over how we use JavaScript on the front end in lesson 12 of our mini boot camp here. And it was a way for web developers to add functionality to their web pages. In its early days, it did just that, and it worked fantastic. Anytime you click a button, that's JavaScript. Anytime you kind of hover over something, that's JavaScript. Anytime anything happens with user interactions on the screen, that's JavaScript working. And it served its purpose really well for a long time as just this front-end language. Recently, the introduction of the V8 engine by Google really improved the speed and the functionality of JavaScript. And it led to the development and release of a lot of really exciting new front-end frameworks, which we actually cover in the Lambda School Academy of Computer Science. This is our full program. And it led to these new front-end frameworks and eventually led to Node.js. And Node.js is a way to run JavaScript on a server, what we would call back-end development. So now we can have servers running JavaScript, we can have front-end running JavaScript, and we can have a full, complete JavaScript stack. This development led to this huge resurgence of JavaScript. JavaScript is now one of the world's most widely used programming languages. We find JavaScript used on front end, back end. We have mobile development, IoT, anywhere a traditional programming language would be used. Recently, the newest version of JavaScript came out in 2015. It's called ES6. And we're going to be focusing on using ES6 and ES7, 8 plus in this course. And everything in JavaScript is backward compatible. So there's no need to worry about, I know ES5, if I learn ES6, is that going to be different? Nope, it all works the same together. But we're going to be focusing on ES6 in this course. And in our Lambda School full CS course as well, we use ES6 plus. One thing to keep in mind, JavaScript is not Java. They are two very separate programming languages. So If you learn to code in JavaScript, you are not a Java developer. If you are a Java developer, you're not a JavaScript developer. They are very dissimilar. They share similar names, and unfortunately, maybe that was considered a feature by JavaScript's early pioneers, but that's where their similarities end. So keep that in mind when you're talking about it. You're not learning Java, you're learning JavaScript. And so they're very different. So let's get into writing some JavaScript. So the heart of JavaScript are a concept we call variables. And a variable is a way to store the value of something to use later on. If you have any previous programming knowledge, just know and understand that JavaScript is a loosely typed language. A variable can be set and reset to any type, and we don't need to declare its type when initiating the variable. If you don't have any further programming knowledge, just don't worry about what I just said, and we'll go over what a variable is. The anatomy of variable first is a keyword. And there's 3 ways of doing this in JavaScript now. The kind of older way was give it the variable keyword, var. You give it that keyword, and you're telling the computer now everything that comes after this is going to be a variable. And you give the variable a name. So I'm going to give it first name. So this is the variable's name now. It's first name. After that, we give it an assignment operator, which is just an equal sign. So now we're saying set the variable first name to whatever we're going to give you after it. And then we give it the value that we want to set to it. And I'm going to say Dan. So now we have a variable called first name that when called upon will give us the value set to it, which is my name, Dan. And we'll go over why that's in quotes and all that in just a moment. This is called a string. But I just want you to understand what the makeup of a variable is. The keyword, the name, the assignment operator, and the value. And then finally, you have a semicolon at the end of it. And the semicolon is telling the computer, I'm done giving you instructions for this line. Move on to the next line and interpret them as separate instructions. And that's all we're doing when we program, right? We're just giving the computer instructions of something to create, something to build, and something to run, right? It's all programming is. It's just instructions to the computer of what we want to build. So that's kind of the ES5 way. It's just the variable keyword. The newer ways, we now have access to, in ES6, a keyword called let, L-E-T. And we can do it exactly the same as we did var. And we'll say last name. Okay, so you'll notice that everything is identical except for the keyword name. And for the most part, we'll use let and we'll use the next one over var. There's a couple of new features of the let keyword that are kind of out of the scope of this talk, but let is kind of the go-to now. The third way is const. And const is actually unique and has a lot of features to it. And it's saying that, let's say, favorite food. I'm going to say my favorite food is taco. Const is saying that this is set in stone. We cannot change what that equals anymore. Favorite food will always be taco. Okay? And that's saying const, and that stands for constant. So it's a constant. It can never be changed. We like to think of constants, where you would really use them. Where they really come in handy would be like, storing passwords, storing account information, things like that you just don't want changed in your program. For the most part, unless we're going to change something, like unless the last name is going to change, we're going to use const. And that just keeps our code a bit cleaner. And really, it'll throw an error if we try to change something we didn't mean to change. So these are the three ways of declaring a variable: var, let, and const. And for the most part, we're going to use const, and we might see some let thrown in. And we very rarely would use var. And probably no applicable time in this course will we use var. We're going to use const and let from now on. One other thing I want to show you before we get going, really get going more deeper, is a simple command we can use called console.log. And console.log is going to print something to our console. And this black area on the right here is our console. If you want to see where your console is on your web browser, you can open your developer tools, and you'll find developer tools under View, Developer tools. There's some shortcuts to open them as well. But this is your console here. Okay, so console.log is going to print whatever you give it to the console. So let's print the string hi. And we can run it. And now we see that hi has printed to the console. Okay, and now we can start putting variables in, right? We know that first name is equal to Dan right now. So let's console log what first name is. And we'll see Dan prints on the screen. We can do that to all of our variables. This is called calling a variable here. And we can use those variables in place of my first name and last name. Cool. So that's console.log. Console.log, parentheses, and then whatever you want to print to the screen goes in between those parentheses. And don't forget your semicolon. So let's start talking about data types in JavaScript. JavaScript has three primitive data types, what we call primitive, kind of at its core, at its base. We've already seen one of them, and that's the string. So let us talk a little bit more about strings. A string is just a series of text between two quotes, and this can either be single quotes, they can be double quotes, and they can also be backticks. And backticks have special properties to them that we won't go over today, but just know that they do have special properties to them. For the most part, for our style, we're going to see single quotes. Single quotes are just a better use case for us. So anything in between those quotes is a string. And this includes letters, it includes numbers, it includes punctuation, it includes anything in between those quotes. That's a string. And we can even see, let's go console log favorite food. You see that whole string print out there. That's a string. So if it's in between quotes, just know that it's a string. Okay. And it's just a series of text. The next we will look at is a number. And a number is going to be very similar to what you think it is, and it's just a number. There's no quotes around it. Remember, if there's quotes around it, then it's a string. There's no quotes around a number, and it's a number. And it can be a whole number. It can be decimal. It can even be negative if you want. But it's still a number. Right? And so a number is just any number you want to give it. 0 is a number, 1, etc. Right? So that's a number. Our third primitive data type is called a Boolean. And Booleans come from low-level computer science and this kind of thought that there's a true or a false. There's an on or an off. There's a 1 or a 0. And that's what the concept that powers binary code and the very core of computers. You've seen binary code in the past that looks something like this. This is telling a computer 0 is off, 0 is off, 1 is on, and etc. It's one of two things. In JavaScript, it either means true or false. And we write Booleans just like that. We can write a Boolean. And remember, it does not have quotes around it. If it has quotes around it, that's a string. If it doesn't, that's a Boolean. So true and false. That's what Booleans are. It may seem really simple right now, but they can get a little bit complicated later on, and we'll go into more complicated steps with Booleans. But just want you to understand that, there's no like trulse. There's no middle ground. It's either true or false, and that's what a Boolean is. Those are our 3 primitive data types in JavaScript. Now that we have access to numbers, Booleans, strings, let's talk about math. And math operators work in JavaScript exactly as they would on your calculator. Get rid of that. And we can say 1 plus 1. And we get 2. We got pluses. We got minuses. We've got multiplications. And in multiplication on a computer is an asterisk. So that means 1 times 2. And we've got division as well. And it all works the exact way you would expect it to work on your calculator. Okay. We also have kind of a unique math operator that only exists, not only exists, but it exists in computer science and in programming languages, and it's called the modulo. And the modulo, let's say we have 10. Let's see, what if we do this? We go 10 divided by 6. What's going to come out? All right, it's going to be 1 point something, 66667. Okay. A modulo is written as like that percent sign. And what this is saying is I'm going to divide this. I'm going to do the whole division. And instead of giving out how many times that number goes into that number, I'm going to say what is left over? What is the remainder of that number going into that number? So in this case, 6 goes into 10 one time, and there's 4 remainder, right? Now we can see that we get the remainder back. It's a really important concept to understand that you get the remainder back only. You don't get the amount of times it divides into it. You only get the remainder back. So let's say we had 10 divided by, or 10 modulo 5. 10 modulo 5, 5 goes into 10 2 times. What's the remainder? Well, it's 0. There's no remainder, right? It equally divides into 10. What if I said instead of 10, I said 11? Now we got 1. Okay, so the modulo it's important to understand that it only gives you the remainder back of however many times it divides into it, it's going to and give you the remainder back. It might seem kind of like, when am I ever going to use that? But you'll actually get some use out of it tonight, and you'll see some use cases, and it really works well in a lot of ways, and you'll learn more about it. Moving on. Those are our math, right? So plus, minus, multiplication, divide, and modulo. Let's start talking about global objects and the methods that are on them. So we'll learn about objects next week, but I want to say that JavaScript and working in the browser gives us a lot of things for free. We've already used one of those built-in things, right? And that's console.log. So console is the global object, and .log is the method on console log. And console.log logs to our console, right? And we're using global objects, free built-in objects and methods that are already given to us by JavaScript. There's a whole bunch of them, and we'll learn about a lot of them as we go. But the second one we're going to learn about today is the math object. And math is written just as like math. And just remember that this is case sensitive. That has to be a capital M in order to get what you want out of it. Sorry if that was too small. So that has to be capital M. So now we have access to all of these cool methods that are going to do awesome math things for us. The first one we'll talk about is POW. So how to write a method is we say math, and then we say dot, just like remember console.log. We're going to say math.pow. And math.pow is essentially going to take two numbers, let's say 2 and 2. And remember, they're just notice that they're comma separated numbers. If I just had 22 in there, or that would give us an error. So there has to be a comma in between them. What that's doing is that's essentially saying 2 to the second power. So we should get 4 back from it, right? 2 to the second power is 2 times 2, and that's 4. Say 2 to the third power is going to be 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. And we can use that for any combination of two numbers. So, we want to say 3 to the third power, 27. So math.pow takes the first number is going to be the big number. Remember back to math class, if you haven't used this in a while, the first number is the big number. And that second number is going to be the little number right on top of it, right? So that's going to be 3, and then there's going to be a little 3 up here. And that's what it's going to give you back. It's going to give you that to a power. So that's useful. And let's move on. The next math function we're going to talk about are rounding functions. So let's just start with round. So harking back to our math classes from elementary, middle, and high school, we knew that if we wanted to round something, that would mean, take a decimal and either take it up to the nearest whole number or down to the nearest whole number, right? And it's going to work exactly like you think it did in math class. Is that 1.6, anything 0.5 and above is going to go up. Anything below 0.5 is going to go down. So we'll see that's going to be 2. Right? And 2. And oops. Anything below 0.5 is going to go down to 1. So rounding works just like you would think it does. 0.5 and above goes up. Below 0.5 goes down. What happens if we want to tell it that we always want to go down, no matter what, even if it's 1.999? We always want to go down. Well, we have a function or method for that, and it's called floor. And floor will round it down no matter what. So 1.4 we expect to be rounded down, and it does. What about 1.7? Still 1. 1.999. Still 1. Floor always takes it down no matter what that decimal is. It always just brings it down to the lowest or to the nearest number down. For the opposite of that, we have a function that will round it up, and it's called ceil, and that stands for ceiling. I think personally they should have called it roof. That would have made much more sense, floor and roof, but floor and ceil are what we have, and ceil will always round it up no matter what. So 1.999 should be 2 no matter what, right? What about 1.001? It's 2. It always brings it up to the nearest whole number. Okay. And so that's round, floor, and ceil. And those are on our math object. And our math object has dozens and dozens of these methods that allow us to manipulate numbers and use them through like as kind of a scientific calculator, essentially. And there's so much out there, but these are the ones we're going to focus on for this lesson. One last built-in method I want to talk about is on a string. So let's give my first name. Okay, so we have that string first name. I can console log. first name. We can see that Dan pops up. So my first name is Dan. So all strings have a property called length. And length is going to give you the length of the string. And what that means, it's going to give you every character on the string. So if I call first name dot length, we should see 3, right? Because D-A-N. There's 3 characters in there. And there we go. We have 3. So it's going to count the amount of characters in your string and give you that back. It also counts spaces. It also counts punctuation. It also counts numbers. So we should get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 back. There we go. And even that space is still counted as a character. It's the length of all of the characters in between the two quotation marks. So it's all of the characters in your string is length. Okay. And so that's going to play an important role in tonight's lesson. So those are kind of our main data types that we're going to be working with in this lesson. Now I want to move on to something a little more advanced, and that's called functions. And we introduce functions tonight because it's how JavaScript runs. So just like variables, there's 3 different ways to write a function. You can write the keyword function, just like var, let, const, etc. Those tell the computer what we're doing. Function is telling the computer that what is about to come is a function. Okay, just like our other keywords, we give it a name, my phone. Now this is where we kind of differ a little bit. Instead of giving it an equals, we're going to give it an open and close parentheses. And we'll go over in just a minute why we give that open and close parentheses. After those open and close parentheses, we give an open and close curly brace. And so this is a curly brace. This is not to be confused with a bracket. They're the curly ones. And we'll use brackets on lesson 9 or lesson 8 on Monday. So functions, remember, this is the syntax to write a function. It's the function name or the keyword function, the name of the function. In this case, I've named it my function or my func. Open and close parentheses and open and close brackets. So functions are how JavaScript runs, how computers, calculate what you're trying to do. That functions are how everything runs. We need functions to compute data, to change data, to do something with that data, and that's why we use functions. So inside of a function, inside of these curly braces, we can give it some code to run. So let's give it console log. And I want to just console log my name. Let's hit run. We'll see that my name isn't being printed to the screen. And that's because all we've done is created the function. We've never told the computer to run this function. How we tell it to run that function is to write the name of the function and then to give it those open and close parentheses. I like to say that these open and close the function, the name of the function itself is your car. That's your car. If your car is just sitting there, is it running? No, hopefully not. Well, but it's not running, right? It's just your car sitting there, right? You have to put the keys in your car and start the ignition. And to do that to a function, we use the open and close parentheses. Now this is saying, start that car, start that function. Okay, so if you're ever like, why isn't my function running? Make sure you have your open and close parentheses. And now we see that it console log Dan. Dan in the function. There we go. Now it's doing the work we want it to do. So this is fine, but I can console log Dan in the function whenever I want. We are now going to talk about something called arguments. And arguments are data that we give to a function to include it inside of the function body. And so inside of these parentheses, essentially we're creating a new variable. And I'll just want to say name. So imagine like this, var name equals, we don't know yet. We don't know what that variable is going to equal yet. But imagine that's what it's doing when we give an argument to a function. We're going to give it the variable of name. And now let's go name plus. We can include that in our function. Right? Let's not, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And so now part of my key is to include whatever that name is going to be. So now we can say Dan. And that's going to line up with each other. So now when we run this function, this is what it's going to say. Name equals Dan. When we run the function here. Okay. And now we can use that name anywhere we want inside the function. In this case, we're going to print Dan in the function. We'll say something other. There we go. Let's see what happens when I don't put a name in there. It's going to tell me undefined. I haven't given that name a definition. So let's give it Dan. And the cool thing about functions and why we write functions is to be able to reuse the code that's inside of the function, right? So I can say my function, okay. Well, this might not both print, but there we go. So now we see that just using that name and passing that string in. So in this, when this function runs, name is equal to Dan. When this function runs, name is equal to Jose. Okay, and now we see two different codes pointed to the screen. And we can do this 100 times with different names. And it'll run with that code all those times. And so that's an argument. And that name is an argument. And we can actually, what's cool, is we can add multiple arguments. So let's do this instead. Let's give first num we're going to give it multiple arguments. Remember when we did math.pow? How we said 2 and 2? What we were doing here was we were giving that function those arguments, 2 and 2. In this case, let's do this. Let's console log first num plus second num. And Dan is not a number, so that's not going to work. Let's just do 1 and 1. Okay, so now these are in order. Just remember that the arguments are always in order. That first piece of data we give it is always going to be given to that first argument. The second is to the second argument. The third, fourth, fifth, etc. are to the third, fourth, fifth, etc. arguments. So just realize that they stay in order. So first num, what we're saying here essentially is let first num equal 1, let second num equal 1. That's what we're doing when we pass this data into these arguments. Okay, and we should get both of those numbers added up, right? So console log, it's going to log them both, and we should get 2. And there we go. We have 2. So console logging is fine for us. We're developers. We can see the console. I bet most of you have gone your entire lives browsing the internet and you've never seen the console. The console is right there. It's open it up in your developer tools. You see the console's right there. Most of us don't look at the console, especially when we're on the internet or when we're doing things. The console is really just for the developer to be able to see what's going on. If you want something to come out of your function and to be able to use it, we have to use something called return. Return is going to actually return whatever we ask it to return. So in this case, it's going to return 2, right? And we'll see that 2 has been returned. We changed this to 5. It should be 6. But now we can use that. We can set whatever this returns, whatever this function returns, we can set that to a variable. So let's go const returned num equals whatever it returns. And now we can console log returned num. And where we go, we got 6. Okay. So what if I did console.log in here? We're going to see it on the screen, but we're also going to see an undefined. There we go. Undefined, because it doesn't return anything. We see that as a developer, but we don't get to use that in any way. So that's why we need to return stuff out of functions. We can declare variables inside of functions. Let's call this add to 10. The const 10 equals 10. And it just takes one number and adds it to 10. Okay, first num plus 10 is what this function does. And now we'll see we get 11. Oh, not my phone. Add to 10. Now we get 11, right? But let's check this out. What if we try to console log 10? We get 10 is not defined. Well, why is it not defined? We were defining it right there. And this is just a quick introduction to something we call function scope. Okay, and function scope is saying that any variables created within these brackets, you cannot reach in and grab those variables. They're only available in these brackets. The only way you can touch them or get access to them is if you return it. Okay. Another thing I want to tell you about a return statement is that it's the final line in a function, right? Once the function hits that return statement, it says, let's go after the return. It says, okay, I'm going to create a new variable called 10. Okay, I'm going to return this. It says return and stop. Don't run anything after. And we're going to go. We'll see we don't get that after the return ever run. Okay. So keep that in mind that we have to return when your function hits a return statement, it stops doing what it does. One last thing before I move on to the homework tonight and what we need to do it, use it, is an introduction to control flow and comparison operators. So a comparison operator is an equal, or sorry, a greater than, equal to, less than, equal to, also equals to, triple equals is equal to, and not equal to. And we'll go over this much more in depth tomorrow night, but I want to introduce you to these tonight. And so what this is saying is we can compare things like 10 greater than 9. And what this is going to do is it's going to compare those using that equal operator and give us a Boolean back that's either true or a false. Okay, what if I said 10 is greater than 10? And we'll get a false back. Okay, so those are equality comparison operators. And now I'm going to show you what control flow is. So let's say equals 10. What if I said I want to console log is greater than 10 only if this was greater than 10, only if that number was greater than 10, right? We can use something called an if statement. An if statement starts off just like everything else with the if keyword. Then we have parentheses, so it looks kind of like a function, and we have the brackets. And whatever code we want to run, if something is true, goes in those brackets. And we get an equality statement in here. So if we said true, we'll see console log is greater than 10. If we said false, we'll see undefined. It only runs what's in here if this is true. Okay, so what if I said number is greater than 1? 10 greater than 1 is true. So this is going to run. And what if I said is greater than 10? It's false, so it doesn't run. Okay. And what if I said 11 is the new number? 11 greater than 10 is greater than 10. That's called an if statement, and that's how you write them out. And we're going to go more in depth in these tomorrow or on Monday as well in our next lesson. So that covers our introduction to JavaScript tonight. I understand that this is a lot of material to take in, but we have this entire weekend to work on these assignments and ask for help and to really kind of dig into it, and rewatch the lecture and work on the assignments. And the assignments start really easy and then, builds on the last exercise. And it's really great. I want to show you how to run our assignments. Okay, so in your pre-course folder, you're going to see there's an introduction to Node and NPM. Node is a runtime environment originally for use on our backend servers. We do need to install it on our computers in order to complete the exercises over the next, it says 4, but it really should say 2 weeks. To install Node, there's a link. Download and install Node. It's going to bring you to this site. If you have Windows, click on the Windows. If you have Mac, click on the Mac. If you have Linux, you're going to need to do a little bit more, but if you have a Linux, you're probably a more advanced user and can figure it out. But Windows, click on the Windows. Mac, click on the Mac. And if you are on Linux and do need help, please reach out in the Lesson 4 channel, and we'll get you help. When you install Node, Node comes shipped with something called NPM. And NPM is a package manager for JavaScript packages, and we're going to use it throughout our time at Lambda School. So let me open my terminal. Oops, I wanted to make the print bigger, not the whole thing. And what we're going to do is you're going to work on your assignment. So say you go in, you go to lesson 4, the homework.js, and you'll see that there's instructions, and you're going to fill in these blanks. These nulls you're going to turn into the answer, and then you're going to complete these functions. It's not as hard as it looks right now. You'll get the hang of it pretty quick. So let's just complete one. New string. Create a string variable. It can contain anything, right? So if I just want to say my name, okay, So now we have a new string. We save it, file, save. We go back into our terminal. Also in our README, there is instructions to run the test. So you can copy paste this, npm test js1 test.js. Copy paste that, just copy it. Inside of your, make sure that you are in the pre-course folder. We're in there. And now if we have node and npm installed, we can check to see if we have npm and node installed. If we say npm version, and it tells us that it's installed, great. And so now we can just copy paste that in the homework README, and it's going to run some tests. Oops, one more thing. We have to npm install, which is in our testing folder as well. So press npm, type npm install. It'll take a minute and install all the necessary files that we need. And now we can do the npm test. Now it's going to run the tests, and it's going to say 1 passed. Cool. We finished one of the assignments. And if you want to look and see where all the other ones failed, there will be a little check mark up at the top. We got new string to pass. Your goal is to get all of these to pass. And like I said, there's a lot of them, but it's not as hard as it looks. And we have a long time to work on them and work on them at your own pace, but we have this whole weekend too. So just remember, you have to download and install Node. And then in your pre-course folder, you have to press npm install. Make sure that you npm install in your pre-course folder, not in anywhere else. You have to be inside of your pre-course folder. And then you can run your tests. Any issues you're having, please put in the CS lesson 04 channel, and we'll get to them. I've got a couple of minutes right now to open it up for questions. I know there might be a ton of questions, but only a few minutes left because there was a lot of material to cover tonight. Any questions you have, please post them in the questions channel. I got a question here. There is no class tomorrow. There isn't. Fridays, we don't have class. We do it Monday through Thursday. So this is the last class for this week, and our next class will be on Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific. Julio, if you are an advanced user, you can use something called Homebrew on a Mac. I don't know what you would use on a Windows machine. If you want to install Node through the terminal, you're going to have to figure it out. If you have Mac, I would say go through Homebrew. Everyone else, just install Node using that download. It's really easy, and it installs it automatically for you and gets everything set up for you. Yeah, absolutely. You can use VS Code, I believe, with almost every, not almost every language. Most languages you can use VS Code with. Some languages require a compiler and a true IDE, but you can write Python, you can write HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you can write Ruby, you can write a lot of stuff. Go. There's a lot of languages you can write in VS Code. And actually, if you go up to, where is it at? I forgot where it was. You can see all of the languages that you can write with it. So VS Code automatically finds your file extension. So if we look at homework, we see homework.js, and it knows what .js files are, and that it's JavaScript. If you have a file in here called something.go, it's going to say a Go extension is recommended. It's going to now know that that's a Go file, etc. So that's how it figures it out. I'll delete that. Any other questions tonight? There's a lot of stuff to go through, a lot of stuff to start learning. This is really fun, getting into JavaScript, and it's going to be awesome. Work your way through those problems, those exercises. Take your time. If you get stuck, please hit up the CS Lesson 04 channel, and we'll be hanging out in there and helping everyone out. You'll use the .length function in your assignment tonight, and yeah, we can use it next time. I'll show you, and we actually use it in some other data types as well. But that's going to be it for tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this week and tonight. This has been an awesome week so far, and I can't wait for next week to continue on our path down JavaScript and really start learning so much more. It's going to be a great time, and I can't wait to hang out with you guys next week and continue this path. But for the meantime, get to work on the assignment. It's a lot of fun, and we'll see you on Monday. Have a good night, everyone.